Adventures of Chocolate and Friends, The Rat Race by Dr. Nyman for the students of the Key to Learning, February 2024, Volume 8 of the Critter Chronicles. Once upon a time, Chocolate and 7 critter friends left the Key to Learning on an extended field trip with their trusted babysitters, Dr. Nyman and Mr. Wynn. It was a sunny day to head south. We were headed to Miami, Florida. Our group was especially happy to go to Miami, as they have heard of this town. Oswald had said this is the magic city where the Critter Connection is located. Drew the Dragon had heard about the Marlins baseball team, and he was excited to play some baseball with them. Rocket the Raccoon was especially excited for the Cuban food he had heard so much about. Sharky and Slash were excited to see any marine life, as they were going to be visiting the tip of South Florida. Teddy and Dottie, who were the youngest of the group, were just excited and full of energy just to be a part of the Critter Chronicles. Chocolate, who had done some prior research, had established this adventure as the Rat Race, as a tribute to what he had read about of the rat race in Miami. We were happy to see we had front row seats on our journey, as our babysitter was taking attendance upon Oswald's insistence. Mr. Wynn said, "Too many critters on the dash, and I cannot see." So we quickly hid in our multi-purpose, handy-dandy, cinch parachute thingamabob carrier for the rest of the trip. We safely arrived to Larry and Penny Thompson's campground in Miami. Before going to bed, Chocolate and Oswald had conspired to secure some transportation for us to enter the rat race tomorrow as we search for the famous Critter Connection. These two were particularly giggly upon their return. So when we asked about what was so funny, they said, "Not much. You may read about it in future adventures, but glad we caught the mail carrier on time." The next morning was race day. Oswald insisted our babysitter take attendance again, and Chocolate was gathering us to go hear Dr. Bailey inform us about the rules of the rat race. We wondered what the first transportation was going to be. Our first ride was a bit too squished and entirely too slow. Mr. Lloyd, who is Mr. Bill's cousin, had a 1965 bicycle with a rusty basket and only one driver, who must now be at least 103 years young. This is when Dottie and Teddy spied yellow bikes that appeared faster than the old bike Mr. Lloyd was driving. Our babysitter took us on those, and we rode them until the timer expired. We had to try another transportation method. They are so nice. Oh, and just like that, the rat race had begun. As we raced through the campground to find the next clue for the location of the Critter Connection, we had several challenges to identify the next set of transports. For example, there was a ping pong double ×2 challenge. We had to climb a tree, and we had to endure the tangly volleyball net until Mr. Wynn had to rescue us again. We ended up with a very unique challenge that included laundry and hanging out. The hanging was a bit scary, but we endured all of them to reach the next level of the rat race in search of the Critter Connection. The next challenge included a transport to the zoo. This is where Slash and Sharky, who had been arguing about finding Green the dino or Flipper the dolphin, ran into the park ranger and thought, if only he can drive us, we can get closer to the Critter Connection. So Ranger Mike actually drove us there. We finally arrived at Zoo Miami, and we of course had to pose for a picture in this real cool behind the scenes collage of zoo animals. Can you find us? Once we gained entry into the zoo, we gathered under the solar palm tree to read the map and follow the clues through the zoo. We had to find our way through the zoo and all the animals as fast as we can, with minimal distractions, in search for the next clue that will lead us closer to the critter connection and finally win the rat race. Luckily, the secured transport that Chocolate and Oswald had done yesterday scored us a ride on these three very unique transports. Each offered its own set of giggles and fun adventures. Sean the sea otter gave us a ride to the next clue. Sharika the cheetah was next. She gave us instructions and said to be on the lookout for Carlos the Cuban crocodile. Diego el dragón appeared rough at first, but he turned out to be kind and only spoke Spanish. So it was a magical trip with lots of one-way talking that left us not fully understanding what he was saying, except his name. As we continued to pass each clue to the next level of the rat race, in search of the famous critter connection, each transport was increasingly challenging. But we knew we were headed in the right direction and had minimal distractions. That is, until lions, tigers, and bears, oh my! The challenge brought us to explore three mighty zoo animal doors of lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. This is when all the distractions occurred. First, Rocket, who had waited long enough for Cuban pastelitos and croquetas, hopped on a butterfly who was headed to Calle Ocho. When Chocolate said, "You cannot go alone," but it was too late and Betsy the butterfly had taken off. On the other side of the zoo, Slash, who had been in search of Green the dino, found a dinosaur, but after further investigation, it was not Green. So Sharky asked him to tag along to find Flipper. They did not find Flipper, but they found Flapper, Flipper's late cousin's uncle's friend's best pet. Drew was in search of a baseball bat to have it ready for when they would run into the Marlins. Before Drew left in search of a baseball bat, he and Dottie had to wrestle Hilda, the hissing snake. This got very tight, but somehow Simba was already holding Hilda's body, and she was unable to constrict. This reminded us about God's goodness and care for us. Just as we thought the distractions were over, we found ourselves with substitute babysitters who had to step in and take care of us if they can find us all. Rex, our first substitute babysitter, was not only Simba and the snake, but he had to also tame Freddy, the poisonous frog, so Oswald could complete the safe return of Rocket from his Calle Ocho Cuban pastry expedition. At this time, the entire group was spread apart, and we could only hope everyone keeps the meeting time and location as scheduled and finally win this rat race. Meanwhile, as Dottie was looking for Bruno, the baby rhino splashing in the pond, one of his favorite pastimes, Russell, our second substitute babysitter, was guarding the bamboo tree that apparently many folks want to cut down and use to make baseball bats or fishing poles. This is when he found Drew, wandering through the dragon entryway in search of the famous bat-making bamboo tree, when he radioed Rex, who brought the critters he had been watching, and they finally reunited. They waited until their babysitters, who had been looking for them in all the usual places, the monkeys, the elephants, the lions, the flamingos, behind the scenes, and at Critter Connection, finally arrived. "Wait," exclaimed Chocolate. "Did you say Critter Connection? Please take us there." "Yes," said Teddy. "Please, we have to get there and finish this rat race and win." They quickly scooped us up, thanked the substitute babysitters, and ran us the rest of the way. They are so nice. Our babysitters ran us all the way to the finish line at Critter Connection. We arrived first and won the rat race. You are not going to believe this, but the prize was a huge, enormous, gigantic, monstrous pot of gold that was simply too heavy to bring home. So we left it for future critters to also rat race and find the critter connection. The end.